Hello there, and welcome to The High Ground, a Doof bonus content show where we're haunted by R.I.P.D.2. I'm your demon host, Reuben Morehouse.
I'm your deado host, Elliot Diebold.
And I'm your human host, Georgia Diebold.
And if it feels like I just kind of phoned in the last one of those three, I'd say that's fair.
I'm
And
a bit
appropriate.
disappointed.
Well, you know what? The writers for R.I.P.D.2 did it first. I'm just following their lead,
How dare
phoning
you,
in the
Elliot.
third
I
half.
could have been an angel. I could have been a human police officer.
You could have written it yourself.
This is also true.
We should kick off this by sort of apologizing for accidentally being off for 2 months. We just kind of all got crazy busy, and well, let's be honest, we didn't want to watch this movie a whole lot, so it took a while for everything to get back on it. But we're here and we're back.
Now, I'm going to paint a different tale, Elliot, which was... the idea 2 months ago, or whatever it was, when we talked about doing this movie, the idea seemed so funny to me. And then I watched the movie, and that slightly killed my excitement for recording this episode. And then we just didn't do the episode for 2 months. And gosh, I mean, if we had known we were going to go on hiatus and I was going to watch the movie before we took a 2-month break, I wish we had picked a more memorable movie game, because this one is gone from my brain.
I don't think it would have helped, Reuben. Georgia and I
No.
watched this about a week ago, and most of it's disappeared from mine.
Yeah, we were just looking at our notes, and I'm looking at them. I'm like, what am I talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we had plans to make up for the fact that, you know, Reuben, Georgia, and I were all going to be away in May or whatever, and then they just didn't align, and then we had to miss 2 months, but it's fine. We're back now, and this movie's done, so then we can get back into covering shit we actually want to. It's very exciting.
God, what a great idea it was to do this movie. I'm not going to back down from that. I kind of remember bits and pieces of it. It was an experience. I don't know. I mean, it was fun to sit down with a movie that I knew wasn't going to be very good. Like, we did Scorpion King, and I knew that was going to be terrible, and it was. You know, whatever it was, Scorpion King 4, whatever the fuck it was, I can't remember.
We all watched different ones, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was also along those veins. I have to say, I think Scorpion King 4, whichever one of those movies I watched, was in the end a better movie, which is not good. A good omen for this
film wasn't bad enough. It didn't shift into so bad that it's good.
No, I agree.
Like sad bad. Yeah.
I was raised I was taught, you know, if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't say anything at all. So
yeah, I'm seeing very sparse notes you put.
I think you started that more accurately when you said I was like told that growing up. I don't know about taught.
Well, I was
practiced.
I mean, I was taught that. It doesn't mean I took it on. Like, I was taught a lot of math in high school that I've since forgotten, you know?
Yeah, have you ever thought about how to differentiate something lately? And I couldn't do it. I don't know how to do that anymore.
I would embarrassingly fail my 4-unit maths exam.
Yeah.
Now,
I think I'd fail general maths. I don't know how to do anything.
But coming back to this movie, I will say the nicest thing I do have to say about this movie is I really did feel like it was trying. Like,
yeah,
I don't think it succeeded, but like we watching some of those other Scorpion King movies and stuff, like there are a lot of bad films where you can tell everyone on set is kind of phoning it in, and like those to me are the bad movies. Like it's why I also don't really enjoy Sharknado, because Sharknado knows it's stupid and is just trying to be stupid, and I don't like that energy. I usually prefer movies that are bad on accident, and this is closer to that, because like I think everyone here was genuinely trying to put together something that wasn't complete dog shit, and I don't really think they succeeded, but they were trying, and they deserve credit for that.
And there were parts that were good.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think the acting was fairly solid, like overall.
Yeah.
And it felt like there was some enthusiasm.
Yeah, it wasn't a well-written movie, I think, is probably the thing that brought it down the most.
The humor was it was bad.
Very bad.
As somebody who I don't think has a particularly good sense of humor, I could have written something funnier than this. Like, I don't think I'm a comedy writer. but
It was
even I can
rough.
beat this.
There were some bits that I found funny, but
Yeah.
not that many.
That's like I think you even get that with stuff like Scorpion King, right? It's one of those things where when you throw enough spaghetti on the wall, some bits are gonna
Yes,
land.
something's
Like,
gonna stick. Yeah.
yeah. I do think the writers tried. I want to get into that more later when we talk about what they tried, because I think like a lot of it was bad, bordering on offensive. Well, no, not even bored, just was offensive.
Mm.
But I will get like the one thing I'm going to keep giving them credit for is like they were trying to do something, and that's
Mm.
nice to see, even if it comes out kind of racist.
No, I
Yeah,
don't mind. I don't mind the title, "Rise of the Damned." I actually think that's pretty cool. I like
fair enough.
that.
It's
So
I
a
mean,
good
exciting.
start. A good start.
R.I.P.D. is terrible,
Well,
and then
so
Rise of the Damned is okay.
can we talk about this? Because I mean, obviously people aren't going to remember because we talked about this 2 months ago. But you two vowed that you would watch the original R.I.P.D. as well,
Oh, we
Yeah,
did.
which at the time I said was not a good decision. Um, I've never seen it, but I've heard very poor things.
I mean, it was
So I
better
don't
than
know.
this one.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. What's the vibe?
I think that was like it was like on the lower end of a film that you would see in the movies though, right? Like if I
Yeah,
went to see that in the cinema on like a rainy day or like, back, when we were like kids or in high school, if the cleaner was coming to like clean the house, we'd often go to the movies, and this is the sort of thing, that
Mm,
like Snow Dogs was the one that I remember going to see. And I would pitch this about there.
yeah.
Snow Dogs we only remember because we were the only ones in the cinema, so we spent most of the movie playing hide and
Yeah,
seek.
that's why I specifically remember that one.
Yeah.
I mean, that does sound like fun.
It was great.
But this is the
But
sort of movie we would have, like, gone to see on a Friday morning during
Yeah.
school holidays, and it was, like, about that level. It had Ryan Reynolds, always good,
It's
That's
Ryan
it.
Reynolds and Jeff Bridges, right? Are the
and
two
Kevin
leads.
Bacon. It's,
Yeah.
like, a
Oh, well.
decent cast.
Yeah.
For me, it was just like a really like B grade Ryan Reynolds. Like it was very much it was a Ryan Reynolds film. Like
Mm.
you could almost see how he took like a movie like this and started to turn that into things like Deadpool, or was it Free Guy, the other one he had
Oh,
recently?
Yeah.
Freak, that was good.
Yeah. But like it's like the same sort of formula. I think the original RIPD was just a shitty implementation of it. It kind of felt like I haven't seen it since I was like 7 years old, but it reminded me of Men in Black, just not
Yes,
good.
yes.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
Um,
think it was
totally.
trying to be Men in Black. I mean, the other thing is, so we're a few layers deep talking about R.I.P.D.2 here because, like, R.I.P.D.2 is a 10 years late sequel to R.I.P.D., which is based off of a not that kind of timely adaptation of a comic book, right? And I don't really know anything about the source material or R.I.P.D. other than the loose premise and that it's got Ryan Reynolds in it. But yeah, it was very interesting. I felt like I was looking through a funhouse mirror at something that someone might have appreciated one or two versions ago.
I I liked watching both because I think having watched the first one did enhance this second one a little bit.
Hmm.
I felt like there were nods or like bits where they were like trying to do new stuff with old mechanics that probably just seemed weird and made no sense if you haven't watched the original. Like so
Is it
stuff
going to
like
be how they talk in gibberish when Roy is talking to his
yeah,
daughter? Is that what you mean?
yeah, like stuff like that was established and used well in the first one, and then they're sort of just kind of assuming you know that from the first one and the second one, I guess. And it's like I think moments like that weren't as weird
Well,
if you'd seen both.
uh,
And obviously, it is the same character. This is something that
Which I didn't realize until
no,
Elliot told me after the movie, which he also didn't realize, like,
and
neither of us realized.
I only realized it because Reuben said, "Is this meant to be who Jeff Bridges is in the first film?" And I, after watching the movie, I was like, "Oh, it probably is." Googled it, and I was like, "Yeah, it was."
right.
Which now is
Yeah.
my second time doing that.
Yes, 'cause you did that Scorpion
I
King. That's
did.
right.
'Cause pay no
Um,
attention. Don't give a shit who any of these people are.
So, I mean, I think we have to adjust a little bit because normally we talk about movies that I think we can fairly expect every listener will have seen, like your Shreks and your Star Wars and stuff. I feel like we're going to have to be a bit more explaining what this movie actually is because I think
Sure.
people aren't going to know. So, the basic premise of R.I.P.D. is that, after like, okay, I mean, correct me, this is based off my knowledge from the second one. Correct me if I'm wrong. After like cops die, they're given a chance to become ghost cops. where they take down ghost criminals who refuse to kind of, go off into the afterlife happily kind of vibes, right?
Yeah,
And
so
so,
essentially,
mm,
my understanding is basically the process of getting souls of dead people and putting them in heaven or hell isn't foolproof, and some people slip through the cracks.
And the explanation they give is just that there's just a lot of them,
That's
and
right.
there's
mm,
Yeah,
just
in the first
there's just a
movie,
lot of them, and so
they're,
it's just really hard to keep track of everybody.
which is
they're
a
like
fair
God. They're like
explanation.
Yeah,
yeah,
it's not bad.
but they're like, oh yeah, God built the system when there are only like 1 million people on the planet. And now there's so many more, so we can't handle it. And it was like, okay, kind of sounds like God's a shit engineer then.
Well,
But
Yeah,
this
so
is
people will
okay.
slip out.
I've got to talk about this because the fact that God exists did come up in this movie,
yeah,
and it feels like there's a lot of stuff like,
don't.
this is a saving the world style plot, right? Like the world is gonna get taken over by demons, if not for just two randos. I mean, like, come on, like
Yeah, yeah.
if God exists. If you set a world where God exists, you got to do
Uh,
some more explaining
in
why
a
God isn't doing
mysterious way.
anything.
I have just headcanon that the god in this universe is kind of a lazy asshole because it's the
Mm,
only thing that makes sense for this
mm.
universe. Um, but yeah, so to counteract the fact that some people who die don't get left on Earth because the system's wrong, it hasn't scaled well. Then yeah, they offer people who are on their way to heaven, basically yeah, these contracts to get to be
But
police.
it's only people who worked in law enforcement during their life, and it's only the best of those. They
Yeah,
say that several times.
yeah, yeah. I didn't think that's what Joan of Arc did.
Yeah, because I mean, the sidekick in this is Joan of Arc, who has been a ghost cop for a while, seemingly. Um, but yeah, like it doesn't
It's true,
quite
but
doesn't match up. Was
because they
Joan of Arc
say
a
that
cop?
several times, but then they just throw Joan of Arc in there, and I mean, I agree. She was in the military, but she
Mm,
wasn't law enforcement.
I
In
mm,
guess
fact, she
she
was
was
kind of the opposite. She
yeah.
was like a rebel.
Yeah, I guess it's just she loved Jesus enough that it kind of counted.
mm. So
That's
you have
true.
to
She
be a
was
kind of
very
God
devout. Maybe
fearing,
that was
yeah. Okay.
she was a
Um,
saint, and so she got an exception,
So
maybe.
Yeah.
yeah, the I guess the inciting incident of this film is that Sheriff Byrne noticed Jeffrey Donovan gets shot by some bandits as his daughter is about to be married. Um, he's shot by some zombie bandits and dies, and is kind of recruited. Sorry, his name is also Rocephus Pulsifer, which is, I guess, worth mentioning.
And
um,
also hilarious that Elliot and I didn't remember that name
Yeah, that's
because
his
That's
name in the first
crazy.
movie.
That's
see
crazy. It's not a
yeah.
common name. I mean, maybe it is a common name in this universe. Anyway, he dies. He's recruited to join the R.I.P.D. And yeah, this is the, I guess, prequel to the original R.I.P.D.
Yeah.
Another
There's some.
prequel sequel.
What's weird though is his whole character shtick in the first movie is he doesn't have partners. He never works with partners.
Oh,
But this whole movie is him learning to work
Yeah.
with a
with Joan of
partner.
Arc.
Like
Yeah.
it's a kind of worst type of prequel thing where they just like create character arcs that don't fit into the overarching character arcs that already exist. Anyway.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, weird. There were a few fun lines sprinkled in amongst here. I really liked. There was a line where one of the bandits says is impressed that they made it on a wanted poster, which I thought was pretty funny. Um, and then I guess Roy at some point says, "Now that's a carrot worth a dangle," which is I've written in my notes. I don't really remember that line, but it sounds like the kind of line I would enjoy.
I've mostly written that so, that part of it is Roy meeting his future son-in-law, and of course he
Mm,
doesn't like him because
yeah.
he seems like a bit of a, you know, not super masculine. And I was like, here we go, down with toxic masculinity. And we'll come back to it in the end, but that didn't happen. We
Well,
embraced toxic
yeah.
masculinity, in
Yeah.
fact, right at the end.
There's a weird angle where like because the dad's like he's like I'm not sure if he's good enough for you. Your husband's meant to replace me as your protector or whatever, like all this like stupid
Mhm.
macho shit. And she's like, it's okay, daddy, like you've taught me how to protect myself. And so I'm instantly like, oh cool, she kicks ass, and it's going to be a whole thing in this movie that she actually kicks ass.
Nah, she's never really in it.
Yeah,
No.
no, she just doesn't really come back, like, at all. I was so disappointed. I was so ready for her to do some, like, Summer Glau in Firefly, like, crazy shit, and she just didn't.
Which
Nah.
is, like, a shame because I actually quite liked the actress. Like, I've no earthly idea who she was or anything, but she was just, like, a little bit of a highlight for me. She was, like, very just, like, really drew me in. She just seemed
Mm.
really cool,
Yeah, well,
and they just didn't use her at
it
all.
felt like they were setting her up as a main character in the first scene. I actually had a weird thing as we were watching this where I kind of forgot that he was gonna die, like, and so I was actually shocked when he got shot in the first scene, and then, like, he died, and then I was like, "Oh,
Oh,
no,
yeah,
yeah,
he's
wait,
a
that's, like,
ghost, yeah.
yeah, no, okay, yeah."
That's fun. Can we talk about the time of the R.I.P.D.? Because this is kind of interesting to me. I mean, like, I guess they were maybe put into a corner by the fact they had to make this sequel. But so when you see the R.I.P.D., it's very modern, and presumably that's how it looks in the first movie, which I assume it takes place in the modern day, right?
Mm.
But
It
like,
does, but this one's actually a more oldie-timey version of, like, it was more steampunk R.I.P.D. is how I
how
would have
was it?
described it. Yeah.
Okay, it still looked kind of anachronistic to me. And then even like they call them deados and like fucking
Yeah, yeah.
I was
Jeff.
thinking that too, that the lingo is very modern and it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, like Joan of Arc is going, "Oh yeah, we've got to, battle the Deados," and it's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
like this doesn't quite feel right, does it?
No,
yeah."
it did in the first one though. Like that felt perfectly in line with like 2013 era America.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, it's fine. It's fine so far. I mean, I just don't think Jeffrey Donovan is good at delivering quips. It's not
No.
his forte, you know?
The worst, I've written down one where he goes, "You branded me like a damn steer," and then the angel lady just goes, "Moo."
I loved that one.
That was I don't know, I think I was laughing at them, not with them, though. I think we both just went, "Oh," like, I don't know. It's not anything.
Yeah.
You can just moo.
Yeah.
Like, that's not anything.
I felt like bad for Jeffrey Donovan watching this movie because it felt like, well, like I remember this happened to Christopher Judge too. Like Christopher Judge, an actor who I really liked as Teal'c in all 10 seasons of Stargate, and then his career kind of died after Stargate, and he ended
Mm.
up being in like one of the Asylum movies. I think they're ripoff of The Hobbit.
But then he went and became
Yeah,
Kratos, so
exactly. So he's kind of found it again, which I'm really happy about because it was kind of a bummer seeing like an actor who was a big part of my childhood and I really liked, and then he was doing like shitty asylum films,
yeah.
and I was like, oh man, if I cared about Burn Notice, I'd probably feel like this watching Jeffrey Donovan be in this piece of shit movie.
But I don't think he was ever really a very good actor. I don't know, it's interesting, like,
But his
because
career is peaked. Is like what being in a movie like this
well,
tells me.
he was kind of not a lead, but maybe like sixth or seventh billing in Sicario. Do you remember Sicario with I think it's Emily Blunt and
Yeah, is that about
anyway.
like Mexican drug cartels or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, right on
I
the
think we
border
watched
with
that together
America.
in America.
Such a good movie, a real peak movie, and he's like really good in it. Jeffrey Donovan is. Um, I thought. And he's like pretty good in Burn Notice, but he was never really a good actor. He was very like stone faced as a character in Burn Notice, and this is just rough. Anyway, so yeah, he meets his new partner. Can I ask, did you all figure out immediately that his
No.
new partner was Joan of Arc? It took
No, we
me
didn't
way too long to
We
I
work
think
figured it
I
out
it out.
figured
about
it out
5
2 seconds, like
before they
the
reveal it.
other lady called her, like, Joan of Arc in French, and I was like, "Do you think that's Joan of Arc?" And then we actually paused it and looked it up, and then we pressed play, and it was like, "Oh my god, you're Joan of Arc." And it was like, "Oh, well, we could have saved ourselves a lot of time."
Yeah, it felt. I really felt stupid when that was revealed, and I was like, I should have been able to put that together.
I thought it
But
was the one, like, probably the highlight of the movie because it's a twist that actually kind of works on you. But at the same time, a twist that is meaningless and doesn't add anything, like aside from just like
except
it's like
she's
a
afraid of
literary gotcha.
fire.
And it worked too
She's
because, like,
afraid of fire, Elliot.
as it yeah, because as it turns out as well, the actress is Australian and her French accent was pretty good,
Yeah, I thought
but
it
I
was alright.
thought definitely due to the character design and everything, I was, like, dead sure she was Scandinavian for most of it. I think somebody even said Hannah said something, "What's her accent?" I was like, "Well, she's obviously Scandinavian." And then as the movie went on, I was like, is she?"
That's why
And
her
then no.
her like skin suit sounded like she was from New Orleans. Like you know how the So that both of one of the things in this world is like you look like a different person when you're on Earth if you're in the R.I.P.D. And both
Mm.
of the people in R.I.P.D.2 are black women, and one of them has that
Very
like
progressive.
French-ish accent. Like I kind of got the vibe she was meant to be from like somewhere near New Orleans or something. But it's because she's Joan of Arc. That's only just clicked for me
I'm not
Yeah,
quite
maybe.
putting together what you mean by that. Why is that clicking? What is it?
because
Just because she's got a Frenchy accent?
yeah, and Joan of Arc was Frenchy, so
Well, she was French.
yeah.
She was French-ish.
Yeah, she did okay. Um, yeah, okay, fair enough. So yeah, the plot that starts to unfold over the course of this movie is there's a big evil plot to kind of open a hellmouth or whatever. And there's some deados. There's one big bad deado who really is kind of trying to make this happen. But so Jeffrey Donovan and Joan of Arc hunt down the people that killed him, and they find this like gang of deados, including one who just kind of becomes the third member of their gang.
Yeah, the humor.
Who I mean, okay, so he had some real clunkers of lines, but he was just so eager. You couldn't
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
but love him. I think he's the perfect example of someone who's actually kind of feels like he's giving it a try in this movie.
100%.
I will say this is about the point where I think I've just written in my notes, like, the movie had started off kind of okay, like, I wasn't minding it, and then around about here, like, after, like, Roy and Joan had sort of start to, like, interact with each other, I feel like it took a steep downward
Yeah,
turn.
yeah.
Personally, I don't know. I found both of the main characters insufferable. Like, he is just this sexist, arrogant, and it's just like, oh. And then she's so sanctimonious. I just was like sitting there thinking, I hate both of these people. This is just hard to watch.
Yeah, it was the right call to add a third person to the gang who can kind of
Yeah,
keep us
100% my
mildly
favorite character. I
entertained.
agree.
Yes. Yeah, because you feel like he's going to be annoying, and he kind of is, but also, at least he's trying, at least he's doing something.
Also, so I just remember thinking he takes the fact that he's dead really well. I know I'm backtracking kind of a little bit, but like there's like a 10-minute chunk of this movie that is just entirely like exposition dumping, like for people who didn't watch the first movie, I
But
guess.
oh, you
Do you
mean
think people
Roy
in the
takes it
Wild West
well?
were maybe more accepting of the fact that of of
Yeah,
death?
yeah. I guess he's
Mm.
lucky that he didn't die of like typhoid or some shit, right? Like,
Yeah.
Mm.
But it was just funny how like he kind of ends up in this office. It's like because it's a whole thing in the first movie that Ryan Reynolds is like not willing to accept that he's like he thinks he's in a coma because he's like, what is more likely that this is a fever dream
Mm.
or that I'm now a ghost cop?
Fair enough.
And whereas like I guess it makes sense for the sequel. You don't want to like I wouldn't have wanted to have seen it again. So but I
Mm.
was just like I was just thought it was funny how this guy's just like, okay, I'm a ghost cop now. Let's go do ghost cop things, and I got a cool ghost cop gun. It's just like,
No, he's very attached to his non-ghost cop gun, actually, weirdly.
yeah, but then he does take the ghost cop gun,
He
doesn't he?
has both, yeah,
Yeah.
but it was like this weird unnecessary thing.
It's also like so. Joan of Arc has a ghost killing sword,
Yeah.
and I was like, why doesn't everyone have like a couple of ghost killing daggers on them? Like,
Mm.
Mm. It seems like you could have an arsenal, like,
yeah,
you don't need just one.
Yeah.
And she keeps, like, carrying on the whole movie, she's like, "I don't need a gun, I can bring a sword to a gunfight." And it's like,
you could
"Okay,"
bring
like,
both.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no need to
It's
not
just
have
this
a
weird
yeah.
flex she has the whole movie, and it's like, I don't okay.
um, to bring us back up to the present of this film, so this third gang member does keep making puns about Roy's name because it's so ridiculous. He thinks it's worth quipping about, and a lot of these really clunk, but they did grow on me by the end. He says things like "message Roy received,"
yeah,
and he keeps
Mm,
saying it, and I really
it
hated it at
circles
first.
round.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah.
I had the same reaction. The first like 3 times, I was like, "Please stop saying message received." But by about the 8th time, I was like, "This is pretty funny now."
Yeah, it's funny now.
He's still doing it, and that's funny.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Maybe it's Stockholm syndrome. I don't know, but I loved it.
I think conversely, like, I've just written towards the end of the movie in my notes, like, I hate the term "deado." Like, the more I
Yes,
heard it,
isn't
the
it
more
so
I hated
silly?
it. It's so
Why?
It's
bad.
just because it stands out like a sore thumb in this movie. It's like
Us.
because they're all saying they're all got big cowboy like Wild West
Yes.
accents, and so the word "deado" just sounds funny, and like and they use it a lot in this movie more than the first one.
Mm.
Surely they could have come up with a better word. I mean, like, it's from the comics, I guess, so, like, you have to kind of keep it, but
Oh, but
it's
do you know
just
what they
terrible.
didn't bring back that was a huge blessing is the weirdest thing in the first one was that to sort of like so a deado would look like a person and then to identify them like, and make them sort of turn into a monster, the way that you did that was by having Indian food in the room and they just
Sorry. You must have misremembered that, Georgia, that can't be
No,
right.
No.
she's actually spot on. That's a genuine plot point
It
from the
was
first movie.
just totally ridiculous.
Oh,
It made
God.
0 sense, and you have this Wild West, like, it's the Jeff Bridges character who's like, "Oh," like, saying to Rod Reynolds, like, "Oh, this is how we identify deados," and he just pulls out some Indian takeaway and just starts taking off the lids, and then it transforms, and it was, like, the weirdest, just, like, not funny random, just, like,
Like,
confusing.
Yeah,
It
imagine
was
if that was
weird.
still the way it had to be done. Like, so Jeffrey Donovan and Joan of Arc have to try and, I guess, like, make a
find an
polite
immigrant.
veneer or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Well, there was a point where I think in the end she was pulling out the tears of Christ or something, but I actually said,
Yes.
"Oh, she's about to pull out some Indian
She's about to grab
spices."
that
Yeah,
garlic
I
And
remember
she
that.
did, and it
wine.
was the tears of Jesus.
She pulled out a thing out of her bag, and yeah, Georgia was like, "Oh, she's probably got Indian spices," and I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes
I was
sense
like,
actually." And then
"It's
it was Tears of
probably
Christ. I went, "Oh."
cumin." Oh, it's not. The tears of
Oh,
Jesus.
man. I ca I don't even know how to react to that. Like, it's just so bizarre. Man, now maybe I have to
Uh,
go back and watch the first movie. That's convinced
that's
me,
the
I think.
weirdest part.
Um, but yeah, so they arrive in the kind of bad town, and it's got this like cursed town gloom vibe, which is actually I think quite well done in the film. Like, it feels really like gloomy and sickly and fun.
It reminds me of that village from season 2, episode 13 of Stargate Atlantis that's being haunted by the Wraith.
Yep, yep. Yeah, me too.
Okay.
That's what I thought. But yeah, so they arrive and they kind of attempt to stop the big bad Deado, but they fuck it up pretty quickly and get captured. So that's fun, I guess.
Yeah, actually, you know what it does remind me of? That episode of Avatar with the Bloodbender, because it's got the people in the mountain and everything.
Yes,
Oh,
you're
yeah.
right. It is very similar to that. Yeah, so Roy is locked up in prison with all of the kind of captured sick townies, but also his future son-in-law, right? And so he's trying to kind of, I don't know, like size him up and stuff. And he keeps chucking out these quips, and they're just terrible every
Yeah.
time. But
This
then,
might be the most I've ever like audibly
Cringed.
groaned at a movie, like
mhm.
ever. Like
Elliot was seriously, he was just like, "Oh," like he was making loud noises the whole
And
time.
like I'm someone who usually laughs at bad puns. Like people make bad puns, and like I'm getting like it's like more of a guffaw. It's like oh, but like there's a laugh component. This one was just pain.
Mm.
The other thing that did bother me, going back to my like toxic masculinity thing, so instead of it being a thing of like him realizing that his son-in-law not being like a super macho guy was,
He
maybe
was
not the worst
strong in
thing.
other ways or
It
whatever.
yeah, that, like, he had a strength of character or something, or that he was actually, like, really nice and reliable. It turned out that he just was a Chad and he just, like, hadn't realized, and so then he approved of him, and it was like, "Oh, well, so what?" Yeah, anyway, it just didn't
Okay,
involve any character
I,
growth at all.
I want to one up you on how terrible something is. So, because this is also this town is where we actually start to use with like 55 minutes into the film, according to my notes, and this is where
Mm.
we finally start to use the fact that both of the like skin suits that Joan of Arc and Roycephus are wearing on Earth are like black women because they almost don't get allowed to stay in the hotel,
Mm.
and then they solve racism by threatening violence.
That
Um,
always
They solve it through
works.
capitalism.
actually, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Anyway, but there's this thing like early on when they first realize that both of them are black women on Earth. There's like Joan of Arc is like, oh maybe, or no, somebody says to them, it's like, oh maybe God,
It's Joan of Arc. She's like, maybe God is trying to teach you something about what it's like to,
yeah.
be different or something.
And like that idea, like when that was first introduced, because that's only like 20 minutes into the movie, and I was kind of like, okay, that's interesting because the skin suit thing was only used as a joke in the first film. Like the joke was Jeff Bridges was a super hot, busty blonde woman who everyone hit on, and Ryan Reynolds was like an angry little businessman.
No, no, no. He was a tiny little Asian man. He was adorable.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
but like, so it was just used for like physical
Sorry,
comedy.
but I mean, I know I shouldn't be getting hung up on this, but so the person that you are changes. So because
Oh, no, they actually set up that in R.I.P.D.1, like Jeff Bridges actually comments on the fact that he like traded for it, like he
oh, that's creepy.
yeah, which added a weird, fun, subtle trans angle there that they could have explored if they
Oh,
were a
that's
better movie. But
interesting.
Well, I
um,
thought it was more like because you can get a lot of stuff with like
yeah.
because men are so weak or whatever. I
Oh,
don't
And,
yeah,
and that's
that does
like they
make
used
sense.
it a lot in the first movie. There's a joke like because they shoot the scene and it would be like the really hot blonde woman, and you'd see this guy like flirting with them, and they'd both be touching each other, and then the camera
Then
would
it would
sort
cut
of
back and
flicker,
it's
and
Jeff
it would be
Bridges.
Jeff
Yeah, yeah,
Bridges
yeah.
touching the guy, and it was very funny.
Yeah,
Um,
Very funny.
sounds
especially the
hilarious.
fifth time. Um, but yeah, so but like so they introduced that mechanic, and then the first movie only used it as a joke, and then this film introduces that they're both black women, and Joan of Arc's like maybe God did this for a reason, and I was sort of like, oh okay, maybe we're actually going to do something interesting with this. That's a fun idea for the sequel. Take a mechanic that's important but was only used for a joke, and like do something new with it.
Although
Like
my
Mm.
other thought there was like, this seems like too much to cram into this
yes, yeah,
movie. But
yeah. I was
anyway,
worried about the
yeah.
execution, and I was correct to worry because so essentially what it is it's like, oh, we're meant to learn not to be prejudiced. That's why God has made us black women on Earth. And the way that sort of takes shape is there's this deado sidekick guy that we are talking about before, their third guy, and he's a deado, and the whole thing's meant to be that they've got to take him and send him back to hell because all deados are evil,
Mm.
and like he needs
Yeah.
to be in hell. And eventually they learn that, oh, actually he has kind of redeemed himself, and they stop being prejudiced and they let him go. And so I'm like, okay, so in this metaphor, it's like don't be prejudiced against literal like demons from hell,
Mm.
like that's like
Well, I mean, he's not a demon from hell.
oh, but
He's just it's supposed to be like a Jean Valjean situation, like he just like stole a loaf
Yeah.
of bread, guys. Like he's not a real baddie.
yeah, but that's like, but
It's just a
he's
weird
still like
angle.
it's all dead. Like, aren't all deados people who were meant to go to hell? Like, I think they said,
Yeah, I mean,
Is
like,
that
well,
right?
why would you
Maybe.
escape heaven?
yeah,
Yeah.
but so
Yeah, I
there's
suppose that's a good point.
so I just think it's kind of weird to then sort of map that whole energy to like racism as
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
metaphor.
But then the
Like,
implication there is like that also that like judgment's not very good. It's like, oh, so
yeah,
this guy actually wasn't really he was a loaf of bread type criminal,
yeah.
but we were sending him to hell.
That's the thing.
And maybe we all need to rethink that. It's like,
I think
okay,
the
we probably
metaphor,
do.
yeah, the metaphor would work if there was actually any indication that they would challenge the system.
Mm,
They don't. It's
they
like they
don't
realize that
know.
this one deado was good. They kind of help him back. And then the end of the movie, it's like now we're going to go back to being cops.
To
So
hunting bad, evil
yeah,
deados.
so it's just like it's particularly in a cop movie in 2022, 2023, to have this weird metaphor. It's like we learned not to kill all the metaphorical black people. It's just
It is
bad. Like
weird,
Mm.
isn't it?
it's like a real bad vibe. It was like the worst part of the movie, and like especially because again at the start I was excited that they were trying something different. I was like, no, apparently what we've learned is that in this metaphor where black people are compared to people who are meant to go to hell, some of them are okay, I guess, but also we're going to keep doing our job of killing them all. Like, yeah.
Hmm.
Anyway,
And I think from memory in the first film, they also have um it's a bit like that, there are some deados who the cops use as like informants and
yeah,
snitches. And I don't know, it all just sits real
yeah. It's
uncomfortably.
just yeah. The more you
Uh,
think about it, the worse it gets. So maybe we should move on because
yeah.
it's
Making me
yeah, it's
uncomfortable.
bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the classic problem with like racism allegory in simplified fantasy movies, right? Like I think things
Yeah.
like Zootopia or whatever have or do you remember Bright, the cop movie in the
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
fantasy? They have this same problem of like they're trying on one level to say the message is, well, we're all the same, so let's all get along. But then the people that they want to imply are all the same are actually different in fundamental ways, like escaped from hell or is an
Yeah.
orc or stuff. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and it kind of it as if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it breaks down because well, no, orcs are big and strong compared to humans, but then we're all the same. So
Yeah. I
black
mean,
people are
there's
orcs. Like, what's it trying to say?
there's ways to do it right, and it's just some of these movies don't got it. Is the
Mm,
problem? Like,
yeah.
Like, you know what did it really well was actually the Aragon books, where like the first couple set up, they have instead of orcs, they're like called Urgles, and they're just like these bad monsters, like real just, faceless villains. And then in about the third or the it's like the third or the fourth book, um, Aragon, the protagonist, goes and actually like lives in the orc civilization or the Urgle, sorry, civilization, and finds out that they actually have this like quite rich culture and that they just had kind of been manipulated and that obviously they look scary and so people just found them scary but actually deep down they just had their own culture and it worked really well.
Mm,
um and that's the only thing I can think of that's really done it in a way that made me actually go, oh, that was like that kind of, I felt like I had learned a lesson from that.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I'm sure, and I'm sure there's more out there, but like, yeah,
mm.
this one ain't
Usually it's awkward.
it.
um, but on the other spectrum, the other side of the spectrum, there was a Wilhelm scream when the hole to hell opened up and a guy fell into it, and that was very fun.
I did notice that. Yeah.
It's always fun when you hear a Wilhelm scream. It's just like always hilarious.
I mean, you said I heard one. I can't remember what it was, but it was like a relatively serious, big budget. Like it might have been a
No,
Marvel movie or
no
something. And
way.
there was a movie I saw one in recently, and the Wilhelm scream happened, and it kind of took me out of what was meant to be a fairly emotional scene.
Oh,
Like
yeah, that could happen, yeah.
But it's just like everyone knows it's a
I
joke, right?
know
The sound editor or whatever who put it in was doing it as a joke, surely.
Mm.
you'd think, yeah. I wish I could remember what movie it was. There was just a movie recently where I was like, oh, this was too serious to include the Wilhelm scream in.
Mm, mm,
Anyway.
yeah. Um, but so the friendly Deado kind of comes back and ends up saving them from jail, which is the thing that kind of redeems him in their eyes. Because he doesn't have to have come back; he just does to save them. But he has a fight scene, and I remember it's very bad,
Mm. I
really
think
poorly
the other
choreographed.
thing that got me about that whole sort of plot was that, there was this whole idea that they were supposed to be learning to be more tolerant of deados because they were black women or whatever the fuck.
Mm,
And so there was this whole big scene where he's going like, I want to help you, please trust me. And they just were like, no.
yeah,
And then he comes and helps them, but only because he escapes. Like they never actually learnt to trust him. They never actually showed
they
him any
never had to
trust.
actually trust him. Yeah,
No, he just kind of escaped and then helped them, and then they were like, "Oh, well, that worked out nicely."
Yeah.
It's like, "Well, you guys didn't earn that
yeah,
at all."
all
Well, no,
according to plan.
he proved himself by putting himself at risk to save them,
Mm,
Well, yeah, exactly. He proved
as he
himself.
needed to do,
Well,
Georgia.
yeah, like he proved
Like,
himself,
yeah.
but they didn't like ever offer him any kind of
No.
trust in
Yeah.
at any
No, they didn't
point, and
at
I was
all,
like,
yeah.
"That's not how that's meant to work."
yeah. Um, But yeah, so he saves them, he busts them out of jail, and then they kind of have a second chance to stop this end of the world event. The way they need to do it is by dropping some of Jesus's tears into the hellfire portal,
Yeah.
which just comes out of nowhere, right? Like, what's the? I don't know. It gets pretty chaotic. This is the point where I started to really tune out. I think.
I think a bit of garam masala would have made more sense.
Yeah.
I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the original version of the draft had it that Joan of Arc pulled out Indian spices,
Mm.
and then somebody, like, who hadn't seen the movie was like, "Guys, it
Why are we
can't
doing
just be Indian
this?
spices." Like, that hasn't been a thing in this movie, and so then they're like, "I don't know, Jesus tears or some shit." Like,
Man, I think it would have been way better. Yeah, bring out a little shaker of garam masala and just tap it a few times into the hellfire portal.
But it was such a, like, ass grab when she's like, "Oh, yeah, and, like, after the Battle of Orleans, I just, like, found the tears of Jesus." It's like, "And now I have
Sure.
them still, even though I died." It doesn't what? Sure.
Yeah, she's been carrying them for like 400 years or whatever the
Yeah.
fuck. Yeah.
I like how Roycephus, like, pieces it together. He's like, "Hang on a minute, like, your name is Joan and you died X hundred years ago." I was like, "Oh, his history is good. I couldn't tell you when the fuck Joan of Arc lived." Like, I know it was old-timey
Yeah, yeah,
France, and
yeah.
that's it.
I would have guessed like the year 1000 plus or minus 500
Yeah,
years.
I'm,
Like,
pretty
But
confident it's, in the 80s.
yeah.
they
I'm not
didn't
even
have
100% sure of that.
they didn't have TV back in the day, so
Yeah.
they had to use history instead as their entertainment. Yeah. I thought it was really funny that she had to get over her fear of fire here to deal with the hellfire mouth or whatever. Like, I just think, oh god,
Giving Joan of Arc a fear of fire is a funny idea.
and the character arc is she has to learn to not be as afraid of fire, which is just ridiculous.
What's the worst that could happen with fire, Reuben?
Yeah, I guess getting burned at the stake.
Yeah. It's about as
Um,
bad as it gets.
There was something here that really annoyed me, which was they kind of do this thing where they're fighting to close the Hellfire portal, and then they kind of run away from the big bad guy, but then like 3 seconds later, Roy is like, "Oh, I have to go find him again," and he was just there. He ran away just to say, "Okay, now I have to go find him again," just so they can have another showdown. It's very weird. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it really goes off the rails here, I think.
Here's a
Yeah.
question. Are Roy and Joan meant to be like romantically involved at the end of this
I
film?
don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so.
Okay.
Which I liked.
See, I got the vibe they were, and I didn't like it.
No, because I think Roy is still hung up. Doesn't he have a dead wife or something?
Yeah,
Am
but she
I?
talks him out of it. She's like, nah, people move on in heaven. She gives him a whole speech.
Oh, yeah, that was weird.
That's
Yeah.
true.
But I still got the feeling it was more like he just learnt to respect her as a
Yes.
fellow cop, even though Joan of Arc is not a cop. 'Cause we I mean, she's a ghost cop now.
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, yeah, but there was a vibe. It was like right at the end, when they're going back into the outhouse, and then he gets trampled by a bison for the second time, and it's even less funny than the first one.
Not that at all.
It was a weird joke. I don't know. Anyway,
But, like, was it a joke? I seriously didn't get it. Like,
these bison just have it out for him. Anyway, but there was like a whole thing because she was like so happy that he was like gonna keep working with her, even though it was because she was saying he had 400 years left on his
I thought
contract.
she just thought it was funny because he was like, "You know what? I think I'm ready. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to go to heaven." She was like, "You didn't read your contract. It
Okay.
was like for 100 years minimum." I thought she was just laughing at him.
I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I thought there was meant to be romantic stuff being seeded there at the end, but I'd love to be wrong because I didn't think it was a good idea.
Yeah.
Did she say the term breaking your balls or something at some point in this movie? But I thought
Probably.
she was just breaking his balls.
There's a lot of anachronistic language, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a bit where this one really drove me mental so much that I actually went and looked it up. Roy calls Astaroth the demon asshole Roth as they're kind of sparring or whatever. And so I looked it up because I was like, that can't be right. And so yeah, we're in kind of the late 1800s here. The word asshole wouldn't have been used for about 40 years after Roy died. So I had to look it up because it was driving me so mental. And I know that they didn't bother. I know they didn't care about this, but I cared about it. Why would he say that? It's not a word that he would know.
I mean, maybe this is where it started.
Oh, interesting. Now that's a good headcanon. I like that.
It comes from Astaroth.
Which can we also talk? Astaroth is like a weirdly deep plug for your villain in a movie like this, right? Like,
I don't understand why they didn't just have it be Lucifer.
Yes,
I
because I thought it was going to be Lucifer at the start.
Same.
Yeah.
And I guess they thought Lucifer was a bit much, which I guess is fair, but like.
But even like Beelzebub is like way more well known. Like, why did they go for the one that like nobody's really heard of?
The only reason I know of Astaroth is because of Supernatural, and like
Mm,
He was introduced very late on because it's even though he's like a member of the big three, it's like nobody's fucking heard of him. Like, yeah, a
yeah.
Beelzebub would have been a better one.
Mm,
Anyway, I
yeah.
mean, it's
It was just
weird.
random, yeah.
Yeah, like I'm kind of like on the one hand, I'm like I like it because it's like a deep cut and it's like
Mm.
some intense demonic lore. On the other hand, I'm like nothing else about this movie was on that level, so it feels kind of out of place. And it's like it probably would have just been easier if you went for a demon with more name recognition.
Yeah.
Just call him Lucifer, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah. But they defeat Astaroth. They close the Hellmouth. It all ends well, and the third member of their gang becomes the new sheriff in town, which it feels
I forgot about
strange
that.
now that I'm thinking about it, but I guess it makes sense. I don't know.
Best thing is how there's something said about like somebody goes, "Oh, you should like elect, you should elect like who's going to be the sheriff." And then this one lady is just like, "He's the sheriff." And they're like, "Okay." It's like, "Wait,
Yeah,
why?" And then we're like joking because she was the only person who stayed in town for the like sort of end of days because she was just like so
she's the only one who wasn't
impressed
kidnapped.
by the evil like innkeeper guy who we haven't really talked about, but slash mayor of the town.
Don't
But
worry about it.
I just know
don't
you're
worry
right. That's a
about it.
whole major character who hasn't even come up in our discussion and
Because
doesn't
he
need to.
wasn't necessary to the plot at all.
There was
But,
a lot of steps of kind of what was going on in the evil town. Like I do remember I felt it was kind of well done, but also just is not important or necessary for the plot.
yeah. But anyway, they say something about like, "Oh, you need to elect a new sheriff," and just this one lady's like, "Him," and they were like, "Okay," and she's like, "Oh, and I'm the deputy." And they're like, "Okay." It's like, I mean, that's not how
Yeah,
voting works,
no.
but
If
sure.
you look in the town bylaws, you have to have slept there the night before to be eligible to vote. So she was the
She was
only
the
eligible voter.
one out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's Then there's a kind of a scene where Roy is approving of his daughter's fiance to
Mm.
his daughter. He sees his daughter again, and yeah, he can only speak in gibberish, which I guess is something from the original, presumably.
Yeah,
It is, and they didn't bother to explain it here, which was really weird.
I didn't even notice that actually. I just went with it because because it was explained in the first one. But that's a good point.
But yeah, it was kind of funny. I don't know. It was all right.
Or when she looks at her and goes, "I feel like I've known her my whole life." And I was like, "Oh god."
Yeah, that was
Hmm. Yeah.
My
especially because
last
didn't they do that exact thing with Ryan Reynolds' wife in the first one?
yes.
Like almost word for word, she says that. Yeah. Anyway.
So my last note I've written is just, I've just written,
Yeah, which I think is a fair reaction to this film as a
I
whole.
think it was my summary of the film. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't even know.
Yeah. So yeah, what would we give this movie out of 10?
666.
That is so many.
Yeah, that's way higher
Six
than I would have said.
6 is too high.
Sorry,
Uh,
0.666.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd give it like a solid 3.5, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say about a 3 or 4.
Like it could be
Yeah.
worse. It could be a 1 or a 2, but it
No,
also
see,
could
'cause
be a lot better.
But a 1 or
one
2
or
is
two
funny.
swing back around. Like
Yeah.
this is firmly in that 3 to 4 section where it's not so bad, it's good. It's like Georgia said at the start of the
Mm.
episode. Like a Neil Breen is a solid 1 out of 10, and that circles back around for enjoyment purposes being like an 8 or 9.
No, yeah.
Mm.
I would see Neil Breen as like a -1, which then,
Oh, okay.
overflows to a
So
right.
Oh, that's
is 0
interesting.
just complete unenjoyment in that
Yes,
situation?
yes.
Okay. Then
Yeah.
okay, from yeah,
3 or
uh
4.
2 to 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, thumbs up for R.I.P.D.2.
Mm,
Well, thumbs.
thumb pointing sideways.
Yeah, you'd at least make the effort to stick out your hand. You'd maybe get a thumb somewhere, but
Your thumb twitches.
now,
What's an interesting question, Georgia? Would you recommend this one or the first one?
if you have to watch an R.I.P.D. movie, and
I
you
mean,
do,
again, it's like, what are you watching it for? If it's just like,
Well, you're not watching either of
oh,
them for enjoyment, so
well, yeah, but I mean, if it's like, oh, it's raining today and I want to kind of watch a bad movie, like, I think the first one has more going for it for just like a casual watch.
okay.
Mm,
And it's genuinely funnier.
There were
The humor in this is very it's
Yeah.
very bad.
Jeff Bridges was pretty funny, I remember, in the first one.
Yeah, I actually thought he was, and Ryan Reynolds is always pretty solid,
Yeah. Well,
and
he's playing
actually
Ryan Reynolds' character as seen in Deadpool and Free
And
Guy.
well,
every
yeah.
Ryan
Well,
Reynolds
and the
movie.
plot, actually sort of held up in that one.
What's
There was the whole
weird
idea of him being a dirty cop and stuff that, actually I thought was
Yeah.
sort of fun and interesting.
What was weird is how much lower the stakes were in that first one. Like this one had that sort of sequelitis or just kind of more budget thing where it was like also it needs to be hell opening up and the whole world will end. Whereas in the first one it was just some deados who just wanted more power.
Mm. And
Anyway.
also, Ryan Reynolds trying to get, revenge against Kevin Bacon.
Yeah,
Was sort
yeah.
of yeah.
Spoilers.
Yeah,
Not really.
spoiler alert. Da-da.
Yeah, for the first 5 minutes of the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you would recommend the original?
Over this one for sure. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. I'd
Yeah,
recommend it
sure,
over
sure.
this one.
So are we going to do that next month? Is that the plan? We'll go back to do
no.
Sure isn't.
R.I.P.D. and
No,
you
we've
guys
already
can watch
we've already watched it.
R.I.P.D.2 again.
No, I'm saying I now want to make a demand.
All right, let's hear it.
And my demand is that we should watch the BBC Pride and Prejudice as our next sort of 2 or 3 month long
I think
thing.
3 months. I looked it up and it's 6 45-ish minute episodes. So I
Sure.
think
So
two episodes a month.
2 a month. All right.
Yeah, so this is the one starring Colin Firth. As just the only well-known maybe name, at least that I know. But yeah, because I think when you guys were doing your Media MD podcast, we had tossed up me coming on to do Pride and Prejudice, I think, at one point.
Probably, yeah.
And I think there's some other interest. Is that right, Elliot?
Yes, to be confirmed, but probably, yeah.
Yeah, some other people who are potentially keen to guest star. I think I'd like to something a little bit different from anything else that we've done, and I think neither of you guys have seen it. I actually just recently rewatched it, which is why it kind of came up. Actually, Hannah rewatched it, and then I was so sad about missing out that I then immediately
Yeah,
rewatched it.
it got watched twice in this household in the last few weeks.
And it was just
God damn.
so much funnier than I even remembered. And I haven't watched it for or read the book for a really long time. And I just was this is good. It's a bit different from what we normally do, but I think it's pretty solid. So anyway, that's my there's just a battle going on the notes here.
Yeah, but I think
that's
that
my
sounds fun.
pitch.
I'd be very excited to check it out for sure.
I think you guys will enjoy it.
I don't think I've ever I know roughly what Pride and Prejudice is about, but I don't think I've ever watched it or read or whatever any adaptations of it.
Yeah, what's weird is I don't think I've seen or read anything by Jane Austen, but as a general rule, I do really enjoy all of that kind of I don't know what to call it, British high
Period
society,
drama.
Victorian sort of but I was a huge fan of when Dimension 20 did A Court of Fey and Flowers, which was their D&D version of basically Jane Austen sort of stuff, and I really loved that. And it was I finished it and I was like, this was great. I love this genre. Weird that I've never engaged in any Jane Austen stuff. So
yeah, and I think Pride and Prejudice is her most
it's the big one.
Well, it's the
easily
iconic one for
accessible.
sure, right?
Yeah, I think it's it's the iconic period drama, and the BBC is series is probably the best version of it. The Keira Knightley movies, okay as well. I think Keira Knightley did the best she could in that role, but was maybe not very well cast. And it's just a little bit rushed as a movie. It's a drama, right? There's plot twists and revelations, and dragging it out into 6 episodes makes it better.
Yeah, sure.
And the casting is just really, really good. And it's quite faithful to the book. A lot of the lines are directly from the book, which is always nice. Jane Austen's quite well regarded. It's nice to have her lines.
I've heard of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I watched the Emma adaptation with Anya Taylor-Joy, I think, that came out fairly recently, and I remember really enjoying that. So I'm looking forward to Yeah, Princess Peach
was
herself. Yep.
I thought that was such a good adaptation until they actually kind of totally changed the ending,
Oh, really?
um, and sort of completely changed the meaning in a way. But apart from that, that was actually but yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's just like you
Mm.
find yourself, you're like, about some drama, like, it's like she said something rude at a picnic,
Yeah,
and you're like,
it is just
I don't know
delightful to
why I
let
care
yourself
so
get
much, but it's
swept
just
up
fun.
into it.
I love
Yeah.
that. Like, as Reuben and you both know, I've really been getting into this podcast Reuben's girlfriend got me into called Normal Gossip.
Mhm.
And it's just where people discuss stories of just really low stakes gossip. And like, I lost my mind in a recent episode where it turned out Lauren was using acrylic wool. And I was like, that fucking bitch.
Yeah,
I cannot believe she's doing this.
Yeah, it is nice
it's
to
a bit
have
like
these
that.
low stakes society problems.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the other thing that really like I'd forgotten, and then rewatching it is just how much, like it's sort of interesting because these were written like in the sort of I think it's the late 1700s, was like Jane Austen's time, and like you just these characters are just like people like well they have character traits that in people that
Yeah.
Yeah,
like
sure.
especially like Mrs. Bennet is
Yeah.
just
Well,
hilarious.
let's talk about it when we
Yeah.
actually watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess that'd
But
be something to just look out for is, like, how weirdly relatable a lot of the characters
mm,
are,
yeah.
given that it's, like, written
Yeah.
so long ago.
Yeah.
People still be people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to checking it out. But that's
Yeah.
for next month. So make sure you
Yeah.
come back and join us for the first 2 episodes of the BBC Pride and Prejudice miniseries. We'll be discussing that next time.
Yeah,
What fun.
thanks for being patrons. Or if you're not, you're listening to this 6 months late. You're
Shame on
probably
you.
also wondering where the hell the feed's been for the last 2 months. And now you belatedly have your answer, but you could have found that out 6 months ago.
Mhm.
Become a patron.
Do it. Go to doofmedia.com
Yeah.
and patreon.com/doofmedia and become a patron.
Yeah. And with that, let's do our outro. 3, 2, 1.
Bye,
Highway
hoy,
listeners,
listeners, and
and
get out of our swamp. And
and
also,
also, no
no
harm
harm
ever
if you
came
came
from
from
reading a
reading a
book.
book. And get out of here, you darn deado.